into fall camp kind of with a clean slate, if you will. I mean, most of the players that had any sort of injuries, knock on wood, yep, I was about to do that. Most of the players that are dealing with injuries, it seems like they're on the right track. I don't like to get too much hype around this, but it's good to see him back on the right track. Isaiah Nayor, I think that picture made its rounds around social media with him looking really good without the brace. And if you actually follow him on IG, he during the summer he tends to, and the spring he tends to post a lot of training videos that he does with his like personal trainer. And even before then, you could see him working out without the brace. And so there's been multiple instances of him looking good there. Outside of that, sounds like Catalan's on the right track. DJ Campbell's doing better with the wrist injury. There's still a lot of guys that seem to be on the right track that either came up with injuries as far back as last fall or during the spring. So, what are y'all's expectations headed into fall camp, knowing that, there is so much expectations around this team?
I think from a depth standpoint, to the names you mentioned, and we can even and keep in mind the people you're mentioning are guys that are either starters or guaranteed to play in our two deep, right? So, we can add in two more names, Jonathan Brooks, right? Where getting him back healthy, Cole Hudson, getting him back healthy, guys that are going to be, when you think about Cole Hudson, DJ Campbell, Hayden Connor, and Jake Majors and what that interior of the offensive line looks like, that's something that I've had as one of my three keys to successful season overall Fanatic perspective. And you guys have hit it on this channel here as well in terms of what those positional battles look like. So having those guys back healthy affects Jonathan Brooks, right? There's a lot of questions. If you think about pressure on guys going into a camp or just outright, does anybody have more pressure than Jonathan Brooks has to replace Bijan Robinson as starting running back at the University of Texas, considering who the previous person was, right? And so I think the best fighting chance is having those folks back. One other tidbit on Nayer, and I'm glad you mentioned the lack of brace that he's practicing with. All very encouraging. I think the best thing, though, is that this staff has done a tremendous job recruiting and putting this roster together via the transfer portal, via recruiting, to where we're still not going to have to depend on Isaiah like that, especially to start the season. We can still move him along. If he's ready sooner than expected, fantastic. If he needs a little bit more to get up to speed, you still have guys like A.D. Mitchell and tons of depth there as he gets ramped up. So I think I'm thrilled to get into camp because there's some heavy battles that are really going to be indicative of how this season goes for us.
Yeah, I agree on the front that just like there's not, well, it is an interesting point because there's not that many guys on the offensive side of the ball that have that much pressure to replace anyone. So on that front, Jonathan Brooks is on an island. And I'll pose a question a little bit later to y'all that I think is interesting that I kind of had pop in my head earlier today. But also, Stephen, to your point of Isaiah Nayor not having to be rushed back, that's huge. I mean, having A.D. Mitchell on the outside in and of itself is a luxury. But now having Isaiah Nayor, two guys that are capable of being not just all Big 12 caliber receivers, but potential top 2 or 3 round picks in the NFL draft in the future. And so, excellent point there. But yeah, anyway, Tarik, what are some of your thoughts heading into fall camp?
I'm happy with the health and the depth of the team. This is probably the best health-wise and depth-wise we've been in about a decade plus. Obviously, Stephen mentioned who's got the biggest kind of target on their back in Jonathan Brooks. I think it's Quinn Ewers, actually, because he's really going to dictate whether the season's good, great, or, well, let's not talk about that. So that we'll see if it, and but it's been encouraging to hear that he's really become the leader, and guys like Jordan Whittington, a fifth-year senior, saying, "Hey, when he speaks, we listen." Xavier Worthy saying he's the head of the snake, things like that. Those are all important things that he's got the team behind him and he can lead that. But now it's, can he get the ball out consistently on third down? Can he get to his second and third read, those types of things? Can he scramble when the yards are there? And also, this is another thing. He needs to learn to slide better. Like, his slides are just odd when he does it. I'm just like, ooh. Anyway, because it's more like he's falling down rather than sliding. But that's more of a he'll learn that fine.
Do you remember on like I don't know if y'all played the video game NCAA Football 14, but if you tried to slide with the quarterback,
yes,
they dove forward and sometimes would injure themselves or fumble the ball. It almost feels like that.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, but I'm really excited to see what Jalen Catalon will bring to the back end of the defense. Getting more turnovers will be even more of an essence now because you're losing an entire possession with the way the clock rules are changing, more or less. So lots to see there. In addition to Jonathan Brooks, who I think is going to be a stud, I want to see what C.J. Baxter is going to do. Is he going to be the solid number 2, getting a lot of the carries? And how does that factor with guys like Keelan Robinson and others? Isaiah Nair, of course, we love to see him, but we don't have to depend on him, which is great. And a person that's kind of an X factor that a lot of people are not talking about is going to be Gunnar Helm, because I think he's going to still be very important. Can he take it like another step? Will we use 12 personnel, which Sark is still going to use? I mean, we'll base him on 11. But if Gunnar Helm becomes a more reliable receiver, I think that's going to help tremendously. So those are my thoughts right now. And like you said, I can't believe that it's finally here.
Yeah. And I like you bringing up the whole like Quinn Ewers, Jonathan Brooks debate on offense. I have a similar question. This is what I wanted to pose to y'all. I don't want this to be like a leading question at all, but I just more toward like Quinn Ewers' growth. Do y'all think that, Bijan and Roschon being gone now, do you think that actually plays to Quinn's benefit? We've heard him mention a couple of times that it's a luxury for him to have Bijan back there, that, he always has a guy that he can rely on. But now he has to be the guy there. He has to take that next step forward and be able to shoulder the load for the offense. He doesn't have anyone that can kind of be like the safety blanket for him. Do y'all think that's ultimately a good thing? I know that losing Bijan Robinson is never a good thing in and of itself, but just for Quinn's growth.
For a growth standpoint, I think the good thing is it started with those 15 practices as well as the bowl game against Washington, since they were not physically there practicing and obviously participating in the bowl game. And I think you started to see a glimpse of what this offense would look like in a post-Bijan Roschon world. For better or for worse, we got to see it, right? So now after those practices, after kind of working through those things, now adding in more personnel, you have a spring game. I think you now have a better idea of how we will play football under the leadership of Quinn Ewers. One of the things I've been harping on is, as a quarterback, and that's part of your growth regardless of personnel, is taking ownership of the offense. We talk a lot about Quinn's body, the injury. There's all these things we talk about from last season, but the reality is he was a transfer, okay? And he transferred into an offense that is very, very complicated. Complicated in the sense that I've said this before, Sark is running an AP level, master levels course for quarterbacks. Now, when one grasps that system, and we've seen that in the past over Sark's career, it's as deadly as can be, and it's as dynamic as can be. And Sark honestly has shown glimpses of that regardless, whether it's Casey Thompson, whether it's Hudson Card, whether it's Quinn Ewers. They've all had flashes under Sark's brilliance. But now that Quinn has had time to really be here and understand, Sark talks about, yeah, you may know the play, you may know what we're trying to run, but do you understand the intent? Do you understand why I'm calling this play? Do you understand why I'm asking you to read it this way? And then you growing the freedom to help us out at the line of scrimmage, because that in itself will help a lot of the woes we saw, especially in the second half as teams adjust or you're on the road. I expect Quinn Ewers to be better, in the second half, just like he kind of started to show even in the bowl game against Washington. I think we all agree, whether plays are executed or not, he was much sharper in the second half, and he seemed to start to take a little bit more ownership, holding teammates accountable. Some of those things you're just forced to do it. And so I think that, to your point, Andrew, with those guys not being there, Quinn does not have a choice. Neither does Sark, because Sark needs to, he's supposed to be the quarterback guru. He's supposed to be the quarterback whisperer. He's got to make it. There's just as much pressure on Sark to make Quinn look good as there is on Quinn to perform. I think it's a two-way street in terms of the pressure there.